Here's what Rei Kimura learned falling down 23 marble stairs. Designer heels are a liability. Quarterly reports make terrible confetti, and apparently she'd completely misread her boss for 3 years. Because Dominic Cross, the man who never showed emotion, who'd never called her anything but Miss Kimura, just shattered his legendary control by screaming, "Rei!" and sprinting toward her like she was the only thing that mattered. Plot twist. Maybe she was. For 3 years, Rei Kimura had survived as Dominic Cross's executive secretary by mastering the art of invisible excellence. She anticipated his needs before he voiced them, managed his impossible schedule with ruthless efficiency, and maintained the exact professional distance a man like him demanded. At 41, after spending 2 decades protecting her heart from the wreckage of failed relationships, she'd perfected the facade. Competent, controlled, untouchable. She organized his empire with color-coded systems and strategic precision, kept his children's permission slips filed alongside his corporate acquisitions, and buried her growing affection for all 3 of them so deep beneath business suits and polite professionalism that she almost convinced herself it didn't exist. But now, waking in a sterile hospital room with her skull pounding and her ribs screaming, everything felt fractured beyond repair. The first thing Rei saw through her blurred vision was Dominic, still wearing yesterday's shirt, now stiff with her dried blood, the fabric wrinkled in ways his $10,000 suits never were. His eyes, those calculating gray eyes that made billion-dollar decisions without hesitation, were hollowed out, haunted, rimmed with red that suggested he hadn't slept since her body hit that marble floor 18 hours ago. "Mr. Cross," she rasped, instinctively reaching for professional distance even as pain lanced through her fractured wrist. "Don't." His voice cracked on the single word, raw in a way she'd never heard from the man who commanded every room he entered. "Don't call me that. Not now." Movement in her peripheral vision revealed 2 small forms curled in chairs, Mira and Ethan, still in yesterday's school uniforms, sleeping with the exhausted surrender of children who'd cried themselves into oblivion. A nurse bustled in, clipboard in hand. "Sir, visiting hours." "I own this hospital." Dominic's response was cold, final, the Ice King reasserting control. "Try again." The nurse retreated quickly, and Rei watched the man she thought she knew, businessman, single father, her impossible, suppressed attraction crack open like ice under pressure. Then Ethan stirred, his 8-year-old face crumpling as his eyes opened and found her. "Rei?" His voice broke on her nickname, the one they'd given her during her first week when Miss Kimura proved too complicated for his reading challenges. Dominic's entire demeanor transformed instantly. "Shh, buddy." He moved to his son with the tenderness Rei had witnessed countless times. Homework help, nightmare comfort, scraped knee sympathy, the gentleness that had first cracked her carefully maintained walls. "Rei's okay. She's awake." Ethan scrambled toward her bed, Mira jolting awake behind him, and suddenly both children were pressed against her, careful of her injuries but desperate for contact. Rei's arms wrapped around them automatically, her heart shattering at their relief. Over their heads, Dominic's eyes locked with hers, and something in his expression made her breath catch. No longer controlled, no longer distant, raw and desperate, and filled with an emotion that looked dangerously like the feelings she'd been suppressing for 3 years. "Someone did this to you," he said, his voice quiet but edged with lethal promise. "Someone hurt you to get to me." And in that moment, Rei realized the careful professional world they'd built together was about to collapse completely. 3 years ago, Dominic Cross had been drowning. His ex-wife had vanished without explanation. No note, no goodbye, just empty closets and 2 traumatized children asking questions he couldn't answer. 5-year-old Ethan stopped talking for 3 weeks. 7-year-old Mira developed nightmares so severe she'd wake up screaming. And Dominic's business empire, already struggling from poor investments and internal sabotage, teetered on the edge of complete collapse. He needed a miracle. He got Rei Kimura instead, which, as it turned out, was the same thing. She'd walked into his office for the interview wearing a navy suit that screamed competence and carrying a portfolio that made his CFO weep with relief. Her reputation as a corporate strategist was legendary. She'd rebuilt 3 failing companies in 5 years. What her resume didn't mention was that she'd been single for 40 years, ever since a fiancé left her at the altar for her best friend when she was 24. Then a decade later, she'd risked love again only to discover the man had a wife and 3 children he'd conveniently forgotten to mention. After that, Rei chose spreadsheets over heartbreak, safer that way. "I don't do hand-holding," she'd told Dominic during that first meeting, her dark eyes sharp and unyielding. "I do results. Your company is hemorrhaging money because of 17 different structural problems I can fix in 6 months. But I don't work well with micromanagers or emotional decision-makers." Dominic had hired her on the spot, not realizing he was bringing sunlight into his darkness. The transformation happened gradually, then all at once. Ray implemented strategies that stopped the bleeding, renegotiated contracts that saved millions, and restructured departments with surgical precision. But it was the unplanned moments that changed everything. Like the day she found Ethan crying in the office break room because he couldn't read the cafeteria menu. She'd sat with him for an hour, patient and gentle, turning it into a game until he was laughing. Or the night Mira had nightmares during a late meeting, and Ray had simply scooped her up, whispering fierce promises. "You're brave, sweetheart. Braver than you know. And I'm right here." Dominic had watched from doorways, seeing his broken children slowly heal under her accidental tenderness. Watched her create systems that rebuilt his empire, while simultaneously teaching his daughter confidence and his son courage. He fell in love somewhere between the quarterly reports and the bedtime stories she didn't realize he witnessed, between her ruthless business acumen and the way she kept Band-Aids in her desk specifically decorated with Ethan's favorite cartoon characters. But neither of them admitted it. Ray convinced herself she was just being professional, helpful, maintaining appropriate boundaries, even as Mira started drawing pictures of their family that always included her. Dominic told himself his feelings were gratitude, nothing more, even as he found excuses to stay late just to watch her work, even as he memorized how she took her coffee and the exact way her nose crinkled when she concentrated. 3 years of building something neither dared name. 3 years of walls and distance and suppressed longing. Until gravity and 23 marble stairs shattered everything. Now, as Ray held his children in a hospital bed, Julian appeared in the doorway, Dominic's head of security, his face grim with the kind of news that preceded bloodshed. "We need to talk," Julian said quietly. "It wasn't an accident." Please kindly hit that subscribe button as Ray's world unravels and Dominic's secrets explode. Also, drop a comment below. What city are you listening from? Julian pulled Dominic into the hallway, and Ray watched through the narrow window in her hospital door as their conversation grew increasingly tense. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read body language. 3 years of studying Dominic's micro-expressions had taught her that much. Julian's jaw was tight, his hands gesturing sharply. Dominic's entire body had gone rigid, predatory, the way it did when someone crossed a line. Then she caught fragments, Julian's voice rising just enough. Tampered with the heel. Belton Ferrante. Sending a message. Dominic's response, cold and lethal. Territory disputes. Rival families. The organization won't tolerate. Ray's blood went cold. Territory disputes. Rival families. The organization. Those weren't business terms. Those were... The door opened and Dominic returned, his expression carefully controlled. But Ray saw what she'd missed for 3 years, the predator beneath the polish, the violence he'd hidden behind expensive suits and parent-teacher conferences. "Who are you?" Her voice came out steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Really?" Dominic froze. For a long moment, the only sound was Mira's soft breathing, still curled against Ray's side. "Sweetheart," he said to his daughter, his voice gentle even as something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Why don't you and Ethan go with Patricia to the cafeteria? Get some hot chocolate. But Ray, we'll be here when you get back. I promise." Once the children left with his assistant, Dominic closed the door. Locked it. The click echoed like a gunshot. 3 years, Ray whispered, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. The cash briefcases, the meetings at midnight, the men with guns who called you bosses in a way that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings. Her voice rose. "The territorial expansion you said was about real estate. It wasn't about real estate at all, was it? Ray, you're not a businessman." The words tasted like betrayal. "You're a crime lord, a mafia boss, and I've been helping you. God, I've been reorganizing your money laundering operations and calling it corporate restructuring." Dominic's calm shattered. "My ex-wife left because of what I am. She knew. Married me anyway. Then decided she couldn't handle the reality after the children came. Just vanished. No warning." His voice was raw, desperate. "I was terrified you'd do the same if you knew, so I hid it. Let you think you were saving a legitimate company, instead of legitimizing a criminal empire. The children," Ray's voice broke. "You're raising them in this darkness. I'm protecting them in the only world I know." He stepped closer, his eyes blazing. And Belton Ferrante, a rival who wants my territory, he discovered what everyone in my organization already knows. You're my weakness. You're not just my secretary, Ray. You're the only thing that matters. He hurt you to hurt me. Ray stared at the man she thought she knew, the man she'd accidentally fallen in love with, and realized she'd been living a lie wrapped in quarterly reports and bedtime stories. I need to think, she whispered. I need you to leave. The devastation on Dominic's face was almost enough to break her resolve. Almost. Ray had exactly 45 seconds of freedom before Dominic's security team descended on her hospital room like a well-dressed SWAT unit. You're moving to my penthouse, Dominic announced, already coordinating the transfer with the efficiency of a man who orchestrated far more complicated operations than relocating one furious secretary and two confused children. Absolutely not. Ray tried to sit up, wincing as her ribs screamed in protest. I'm going home, alone, away from whatever criminal nightmare you've dragged me into. Belton Ferrante tampered with your shoe. Dominic's voice was ice-cold fact. That means he knows where you live, where you shop, where you get your ridiculous overpriced coffee every Thursday morning. You're not safe. I was perfectly safe until I started working for Chicago's biggest crime lord. Actually, Dominic said, pulling out a tablet with the casual air of someone about to destroy her entire worldview. You weren't. The footage played in silent, devastating sequence. 3 years of near misses Ray had dismissed as coincidence. The car that nearly hit her in the crosswalk, redirected by one of Dominic's men. The suspicious package at her apartment building, intercepted before she came home. The collector who'd tracked her father's ancient gambling debts, permanently dissuaded from contact. The man following her home from the gym, who mysteriously changed careers after a conversation she'd never witnessed. You've been protecting me, Ray whispered, something painful lodging in her throat. This whole time. From the moment you walked into my life. Dominic's gray eyes held hers. I knew you were extraordinary. I also knew that made you a target. The penthouse was obscenely secure, bulletproof glass, armed guards, enough surveillance equipment to make government agencies jealous. Ray hated that it felt safer than anywhere she'd ever lived. Hated more that Mira and Ethan moved through it with practiced ease, like children who'd grown up understanding that safety required fortress walls. That evening, as Ray sat stiffly on the guest room bed contemplating her complicity in organized crime, Ethan appeared in her doorway. His 8-year-old face was blotchy from crying, his voice small and terrified. Are you going to leave like Mommy did? The question hit Ray like a physical blow. Then Mira materialized beside her brother, trying for bravery, but failing spectacularly. It's okay if you want to go. Her voice wobbled. Everyone leaves eventually. We're used to it. Used to it. These children were used to abandonment. Ray's fury at Dominic at his lies, his criminal empire, his dangerous world evaporated in the face of 2 broken kids who'd already lost one mother and were bracing for the loss of another. Come here, she whispered, and they crashed into her like waves, careful of her injuries but desperate for reassurance. I'm not leaving. Ray heard herself promise, even as part of her screamed that she should. Not while you need me, I promise. That night, she held Ethan through nightmares about losing her. Listened to Mira confess her fears that everyone who loved them disappeared. Understood with crystalline clarity that regardless of Dominic's darkness, these children were innocent, and she loved them too fiercely to become another person who abandoned them. Near midnight, Ray found Dominic watching from the hallway, his expression devastated. I know you hate me right now, he said, his voice rough with something that sounded like grief. But please don't stop loving them. Ray met his eyes, her heart fracturing into complicated pieces. That, she said quietly, was never a choice I could make. Living in Dominic Cross's penthouse was like inhabiting a psychological thriller where the villain kept making excellent pancakes. Ray spent her first confined week cataloging the contradictions until her brain hurt worse than her healing ribs. Monday morning, Dominic on a call with someone named Vincent, his voice colder than Lake Michigan in January. The problem needs to be permanently resolved. I don't care about the details. Just make sure it doesn't resurface. He ended the call, turned to Ethan struggling with long division, and his entire demeanor transformed. Hey, buddy, let's use Legos. If you have 12 Legos and need to divide them into 3 groups, patient, gentle, the kind of father PTA members would call involved. Tuesday afternoon, a video conference where Dominic discussed territorial boundaries with men who looked like they ate nails for breakfast. Tell Ferrante if he crosses Monroe Street again, He'll need to identify his people through dental records. Then, 20 minutes later, Ray found him reading Where the Wild Things Are to Mira, doing a different voice for each monster, with theatrical commitment that would make Broadway jealous. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting. How could the same man who casually ordered someone's permanent disappearance also remember that Ethan needed his math homework in the blue folder, not the red one, or that Mira only ate sandwiches cut diagonally? Wednesday evening, after the children were asleep, Dominic found Ray on the balcony, staring at Chicago's glittering skyline like it held answers. He sat beside her, maintaining careful distance, his profile sharp against the city lights. My ex-wife knew what I was before we married. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, as if discussing the weather rather than his criminal empire. She thought she could handle it. Thought love conquered all that fairy tale nonsense. He laughed bitterly. Then Mira was born, and suddenly it wasn't romantic anymore. It was real, dangerous. She'd wake up terrified that someone would target our daughter to hurt me. Ray stayed silent, her anger from days ago feeling less solid now, more complicated. When Ethan came along, it got worse. She'd have panic attacks every time I left for meetings, started drinking to cope. Then one morning, I woke up and she was just gone. Closets empty, no note, nothing. His hands clenched. She abandoned 2 babies because she couldn't live with what I am. So you were drowning, Ray said softly, understanding clicking into place. Single father, criminal empire, 2 traumatized kids, asking where mommy went. I was barely surviving. Dominic finally looked at her, his gray eyes vulnerable in ways she'd never seen. Then you walked in with your color-coded systems and fierce competence. You didn't just rebuild my business, Ray. You rebuilt us. Mira stopped having nightmares. Ethan started smiling again. You gave them the mother they needed and gave me. He paused, something raw crossing his face. Hope that I could be more than what I am. Ray's carefully maintained anger cracked completely. Because she finally understood. His love wasn't just romantic obsession. It was gratitude from a desperate father who'd watched his children heal under her accidental tenderness. I'm still furious with you, she whispered. I know. His smile was sad. But you're still here. 2 weeks into her captivity, because, let's be honest, luxurious penthouse or not, she couldn't leave. Ray decided it was time to stop being a hypocrite about honesty. If she was going to be furious with Dominic for lying by omission, she needed to admit her own truth. She found him in his study reviewing what looked like territorial maps, but were probably actually territorial maps, which was its own kind of surreal. I need to tell you why I've been single for 40 years. Dominic's head snapped up. His full attention immediately focused on her in that intense way that used to make her heart race. Still did, unfortunately. I was 24 when I got engaged to my college sweetheart. Had the dress, the venue, the whole fairy tale planned. Ray sat across from him, her voice steady despite the old pain. He left me at the altar, literally. I was standing in the bridal suite when his best man came to tell me he'd run off with my maid of honor, my best friend since high school. Dominic's expression darkened dangerously. Names. I need names. Down, boy. This was 17 years ago. But something warm flickered in her chest at his immediate protective rage. I rebuilt myself, threw everything into my career. Then at 34, I risked it again. Met a man who seemed perfect, attentive, loving, talked about our future. She laughed bitterly. Turned out he had a wife and 3 children in the suburbs. I was the other woman and didn't even know it. Ray. After that, I chose solitude over vulnerability. It was safer to be alone than to be destroyed again. She met his eyes, letting him see the truth she'd buried for 3 years. I've spent 17 years telling myself I didn't need family, didn't need love, didn't need to risk my heart. Built walls so high I convinced myself they were protection instead of prison. Then I met your children, she continued, her voice softening. And they broke through every defense I had with their nightmares and reading struggles and drawings of our family that included me. And you, she looked at him with raw, terrifying honesty. You terrify me, Dominic. Not because of what you do, though. We should definitely discuss your career choices, but because I fell in love with you anyway. Dominic went completely still. Somewhere between quarterly reports and soccer games and watching you be the father those kids needed, I fell. Her voice cracked. And I hate that I didn't know the truth. I hate that I love you anyway. I hate that I can't seem to stop. Dominic crossed the space between them in 3 strides, cupping her face with hands that trembled slightly. Say that again. I love you. You emotionally constipated crime lord. He kissed her. Desperate. Honest. 3 years of suppressed longing finally crashing together like a dam breaking. Ray melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, and for one perfect moment everything else disappeared. The explosion shattered the windows. The penthouse shook violently, alarms screaming. Dominic's body covered hers instantly, protecting her from flying glass. When the ringing in her ears subsided, she heard him barking orders into his phone. Parking garage. Everyone accounted for? Where are the children? Ferrante wasn't just threatening anymore. He was declaring war, and Mira and Ethan were direct targets. The message arrived via courier at 3 a.m., because apparently even criminal warlords understood the psychological impact of sleep deprivation. Dominic read it once, his jaw clenching tighter with each word, then handed it to Ray without comment. Dominic, I'll keep this simple. Surrender 60% of your operations and territory by Friday, or I'll dismantle your little family piece by piece, starting with the children, then your remarkable secretary, then you. I know everything: where they sleep, what school they attend, that the woman you've been desperately hiding your feelings for finally knows what you are. Your weakness is showing, Cross. Time to pay for it. Belton Ferrante. He's asking you to destroy yourself either way, Ray said quietly, her strategic mind already analyzing the trap. Accept and you show weakness that invites more attacks. Refuse and... I refuse. Dominic was already on his phone, his voice cold and commanding. Julian, full mobilization. Every soldier, every asset, every favor we're owed. Ferrante just declared war on my family. He paused, something lethal crossing his face. Make sure he understands that was his last mistake. Ray watched him transform into the crime lord she'd only glimpsed before, ruthless, calculating, terrifying in his efficiency. This was the man who'd built an empire through force and fear. The man who could order someone's permanent removal from this earth with the same tone he used to order coffee. And she was about to ruin his entire strategic planning session. Dominic, her voice cut through his rapid-fire orders. We need to talk, now. He dismissed his call, turning to her with raised eyebrows. Ray, this isn't the time. I won't let you raise these children in constant danger. The words came out fierce, uncompromising. I won't watch them grow up thinking violence is normal, that eliminating threats is just Tuesday business, that this, she gestured at the organized chaos of his war room, is what family looks like. Dominic froze. What are you saying? I'm saying if we survive this, when we survive this, you need to choose. Ray stepped closer, her dark eyes blazing. Because I can't be their mother and your partner, if this is the world you're giving them. I can't tuck Mira in at night knowing someone might target her to hurt you. Can't help Ethan with homework while wondering if he'll inherit your empire of shadows. You're asking me to walk away. Dominic's voice was carefully controlled, but she saw the devastation beneath. From everything I've built, I'm asking you to choose your children's future over your past. Ray's voice softened. Choose light over darkness. Choose being their father over being Chicago's king. No one had ever asked Dominic Cross to surrender power. He looked at her like she'd just requested the impossible, which, fair enough, she had. Before he could respond, a small voice from the hallway. Ray? Mira stood in her pajamas, clearly having heard everything. Her 10-year-old face was crumpled with hope and fear. If Daddy stops being bad, will you be our real mom? Ray's heart shattered. She knelt down, pulling Mira close. Your dad isn't bad, sweetheart. He's just been living in darkness for so long he forgot what light looks like. She looked up at Dominic, letting him see the truth in her eyes. But yes, if he chooses the light, I'll stay forever. The field trip to the Chicago Maritime Museum should have been safe. Dominic had assigned 4 guards disguised as parent volunteers, swept the building twice, and personally vetted every staff member. But Belton Ferrante had been planning for weeks, and he understood that the best traps exploit the moment you finally let yourself believe in safety. Ray was helping Mira read a placard about 19th century shipping routes when the lights cut out. In the darkness, she heard scuffling, muffled shouts, then Ethan's terrified scream. Ray! She lunged toward his voice, but someone grabbed her from behind. A cloth pressed against her face, chemical sweet, and the world tilted sideways into nothing. She woke in a dockside warehouse that smelled of rust and Lake Michigan, her head pounding, zip ties cutting into her wrists. Mira and Ethan were huddled against her, both crying but physically unharmed. Ray's strategic mind cataloged details through her panic, 6 armed men, 1 exit, windows too high to reach, and Belton Ferrante himself, watching them with the satisfied expression of a man who'd just captured his opponent's queen, Miss Kimura. Ferrante was younger than she expected, handsome in the way of men who used charm as a weapon. The secretary who rebuilt an empire. Tell me, did you know what you were really organizing, or were you genuinely that naive? What do you want? Ray kept her voice steady, feeling Mira trembling against her side. To break Dominic Cross. Ferrante crouched down to their level, his smile cold. The Ice King, Chicago's untouchable crime lord, finally has a weakness. You and these children. So I'm going to make him watch you all die, then I'm going to end him and absorb everything he built. Poetic, really. Ethan sobbed harder, and Ray pulled both children closer, her mind racing. Then she felt the slight bulk in Ethan's jacket pocket. The tracker Dominic had sewn into all their clothing after the parking garage explosion, his paranoid security measure that she'd called excessive. Thank God for paranoid crime lords. It's okay, she whispered to the kids, her fingers subtly manipulating Ethan's pocket to activate the emergency beacon. We're going to be okay. I need you both to be brave for me. Can you do that? Mira nodded, her 10-year-old face set with determination. Ethan just cried harder, which Ray realized was actually perfect. His sobs would mask any sounds she made. 27 minutes later, Ray counted each one like a prayer. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Dominic Cross entered like vengeance personified, Julian and 30 armed men flanking him. His gray eyes found Ray and the children immediately, and the relief that crossed his face lasted exactly 1 second before his expression went ice cold. Ferrante. Dominic's voice could have frozen the lake. Last chance to let them go and die quickly. Or what? Ferrante gestured to his men, guns now pointed at Ray and the children. You surrender yourself and die while they watch, or I start with the kids and make you witness every second. The standoff lasted 3 heartbeats. Then Ray did something possibly insane. She deliberately knocked over the metal chair beside her, creating enough distraction for Dominic's snipers positioned outside the high windows. Everything erupted at once. Ray threw herself over the children as gunfire exploded around them. She whispered fierce instructions to Mira. Stay low. Crawl toward that wall. While Ethan's terrified crying actually helped mask their movement. Mira proved surprisingly brave, following directions with the precision of a much older child. The battle was vicious and personal. Dominic moved through Ferrante's men with calculated brutality, each motion efficient and lethal. Ray watched the monster emerge fully. This was who he really was. This creature of violence and darkness who fought like death itself. But he was fighting for them. For his family. Then Ferrante, cornered and desperate, swung his weapon toward the children. Dominic didn't hesitate. He threw himself into the line of fire, taking 3 bullets meant for his family. He went down hard. No! Ray's scream cut through the chaos. Julian finished Ferrante with efficient finality, while Ray scrambled to Dominic's side, the children crying beside her. Blood. So much blood. You have to survive, Ray gasped as paramedics swarmed in, her hands pressing against his wounds. These children need their father. And I need to tell you that I love you, all 3 of you. I've been too afraid to say it, but I can't lose this family. Dominic's eyes found hers, pain-clouded but fierce. Meant what you said? His voice was barely audible. About choosing? Yes. Ray's tears fell on his face. Choose us. Choose the light. Choose a life where your children don't have to be brave in warehouses. Deal, he whispered. Then his eyes closed as they loaded him into the ambulance. 3 months after Dominic Cross flatlined twice on an operating table and woke up to find Ray, Mira, and Ethan camped beside his hospital bed like loyal sentries, Chicago's underworld received the shock of the century. The Ice King called a meeting of every major player, stood before them with surgical scars still visible beneath his shirt, and announced, I'm out. Julian takes everything. The territory, the operations, the whole empire. The room erupted in disbelief. Someone foolishly asked why. Dominic's answer was simple, devastating. I found something worth more than power. I found a family. 1 year later, Ray Kimura descended the stairs of their coastal beach house with the careful deliberation of someone who'd developed a healthy respect for gravity. Dominic's hand hovered near her elbow despite her eye roll. Some habits died hard, especially when they involved the woman who'd literally fallen into his life and changed everything. I can handle stairs now, you paranoid ex-crime lord, she muttered, but her smile betrayed her. Humor me. You've got a track record. The kitchen was beautifully chaotic. Dominic stood at the stove attempting pancakes with the grim determination of someone who'd once negotiated million-dollar deals but couldn't quite master batter consistency. Mira set the table with 11-year-old precision, each fork perfectly aligned. And Ethan, now 9 and infinitely more confident, was arguing his latest scientific theory. Syrup comes from trees, which makes it technically a vegetable. Therefore, pancakes are healthy. That's not how nutrition works, buddy, Dominic said, flipping a pancake that looked suspiciously lopsided. But trees are plants. By that logic, cocaine is a vegetable, Ray interjected, pouring coffee. It comes from coca plants. Dominic choked on his orange juice. Mira dissolved into giggles. Ethan considered this new information with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice. Their life was impossibly, beautifully, normal. Cross-security consulting operated from Dominic's home office, legitimate corporate protection, no criminal enterprises, maximum dad jokes about his reformed career. The kids attended regular public school where Ray volunteered for everything from bake sales to field trips, though Dominic still vetted the venues with perhaps excessive thoroughness. He coached Ethan's soccer team with awkward enthusiasm, learning that elimination meant something very different in youth sports brackets. Family dinners involved homework battles instead of territory disputes. Weekend beach trips replaced midnight meetings. The biggest crisis was usually Mira's pre-algebra struggles, or Ethan's creative interpretation of clean your room. Mira's nightmares had mostly faded, but when they came, both Ray and Dominic were there, no longer separated by professional distance or unspoken feelings. Ethan called Ray Mom, now without hesitation, the word slipping out naturally one morning over cereal and never leaving. They were a family not by blood or even legally yet, though adoption papers sat ready on Dominic's desk, waiting for the right moment, but by choice and daily commitment and love that had survived bullets and betrayal. After breakfast, they drove to the coastal overlook, a scenic spot with a grand staircase descending to the water below. The four of them stood at the top, the ocean stretching endlessly before them. Dominic extended his hand to Ray, a deliberate callback to her fall that had started everything. Together. She took it, her eyes suspiciously bright. Always together. Mira grabbed his other hand. Ethan took Ray's. They descended as a unit, a portrait of 4 people who'd chosen each other against impossible odds. At the bottom, with waves crashing nearby and morning sun warm on their faces, Dominic pulled them all close. His internal monologue had shifted dramatically from the calculated strategies of his former life. I was the king of Chicago's underworld. Ruled through fear, controlled through power, built an empire of shadows and violence. Now I'm just theirs, a father who burns pancakes, a partner who's learning that love means vulnerability, a man trying desperately to deserve the family that saved him from his own darkness. Mira laughs at something Ethan said about hermit crabs being nature's real estate agents. Ray meets my eyes with love that still terrifies and heals me in equal measure. And I realize, I spent decades building an empire that made men tremble, but this sticky syrup debates and soccer practice and bedtime stories and a woman who chose us despite every reason to run, this is the kingdom that actually matters. I've never been richer. I've never been more afraid of losing everything. And I've never been more determined to be worthy of this impossible, beautiful, ordinary life. They stayed there at the water's edge. 4 people who'd been broken in different ways, now whole together. The woman who'd thought she was too damaged for love. The man who'd believed he was too dark for redemption. The children who'd taught them both that families aren't accidents of biology, they're built through choice, fought for through danger, and maintained through daily acts of love. One brave step at a time. Please hit that like button and equally share this story with someone. Subscribe for more stories where love conquers even the darkest pasts. Thank you.